Prime Minister Chris Elmore.
For one, sir.
Mr. Speaker, to mark Windrush Day, today sees the unveiling of a national monument at Waterloo Station that acknowledges the Windrush generation's outstanding contribution to British society and will also be a permanent place of reflection. Mr. Speaker, as part of Armed Forces Week, I was delighted to host a reception yesterday in Downing Street. Members across the House are immensely proud of our armed forces, and we thank them and their families for their service to our country. And Mr. Speaker, I know the House will welcome the deal that we've signed with Moderna, which will see them build new facilities in the UK, including around £1 billion of new investment in research and development. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today, and I will be travelling thereafter to Chogum in Rwanda. I will then be attending the G7 Leaders Summit and the NATO Summit, Mr. Speaker, so a full budget of news for you there.
Chris Elmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's comments in relation to the armed forces and the comment? Prime Minister, has he ever considered the appointment of his current spouse to a government post or to any organisation in one of the royal households? Be honest, Prime Minister, yes or no?
Yes or no? Mr. Speaker, I know why the party opposite wants to talk about non-existent jobs in the media, Mr. Speaker, because they don't want to talk about what's going on in the real world. I'm proud to say, actually, that we now have 620,000 people more in payroll employment than before the pandemic began, which would never have been possible if we listened to the right honourable gentleman opposite.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK is the global leader in social outcomes contracts. They can deliver public services in an array of areas from healthcare, mental health care, employment, education and development aid. According to Big Society Capital, every £1 the government has spent in this way has delivered £10 in a further economic, social and fiscal value, including £3 in direct savings to government. Does my right honourable friend agree that the time is right for the government to redouble its focus on these outcomes-led commissioning?
My honourable friend is absolutely right to champion this type of approach, which makes a real difference to people's lives, people suffering from mental health issues, helping them to find a route back into work. And that's why we are commissioning more initiatives through such funds as the Life Chances Fund, helping those people in society who face the biggest barriers to have happy and productive lives.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his comments about Windrush? And can I pay tribute to everyone who is serving and has served in our armed forces? Can I also pay tribute to everyone standing for election tomorrow? In particular, the plucky Conservative candidate for Wakefield. He's standing even though his own colleagues think he's so useless they held a vote of no confidence in him. Does the Prime Minister hold any personal interest in seeing if the public will vote for a Tory that even his own side don't think is up to it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've absolutely no doubt that the people of this country and the people of Wakefield, people of Tiverton and Honiton would much rather vote for a solid Conservative government than for a Labour Party. They're enablers and acolytes in the Liberal Democrats, Mr. Speaker, the chameleons, the karma chameleons of British politics. When the leader of the Labour Party hasn't even got the gumption, Mr. Speaker, to speak out against the rail strikes that are doing so much damage to the people in the north of this country, up and down this country. Absolutely unbelievable silence from the leader of the Labour Party, Mr. Speaker.
He's obviously not been to Wakefield recently. He's crashed the economy, he's put everybody's tax up, The last Tory sent up to Wakefield being convicted of a sexual assault. That's not much of a pitch, Prime Minister. Talking of people not up to the job, whilst the Transport Secretary spends his time working on his spreadsheet tracking the Prime Minister's unpopularity, thousands of families have had their holiday flights cancelled. It takes forever to renew your driving licence or passport, and now we've got the biggest rail strike in 30 years. If he is genuine,
Both sides, let's calm down. We've only just started. The problem is he'll go on forever and nobody wants that, I assure you. Whoever's speaking or asking questions. Keir Starmer.
If he's genuine about preventing strikes, will the Prime Minister tell this House how many meetings he or his Transport Secretary have had with rail workers this week to actually stop the strikes?
Mr. Speaker, this is the government that loves the railways, that invests in the railways. Not £96 billion we're putting into the integrated railway plan building. Not just, I'm proud to have built Crossrail, by the way, Mr. Speaker, and we're going to build Northern Powerhouse Rail. But what we've got to do is modernise our railways. And it is a disgrace when we are planning to make sure that you don't have ticket offices that sell fewer than one ticket every hour, Mr. Speaker, that he yesterday had 25 Labour MPs out on the picket line to fight instructions.
I want to hear the Prime Minister's answer, even if you don't. I think you ought to show some respect for the Prime Minister. Prime Minister.
Out on the 25 and the shadow deputy leader out on the picket line, Mr. Speaker, backing the strikers, Mr. Speaker, while we back the strivers.
Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised he's giving me advice about my team. If I do need advice, let's say about a £100,000 job at the Foreign Office, I will ask him for recommendation. And there you, Mr. Speaker, there you have it. The Prime Minister of this country and his Transport Secretary haven't attended a single meeting, held a conversation, or lifted a finger to stop these strikes. But I did note that on Monday they did find time to go to a lavish ball where the Prime Minister sold a meeting with himself for £120,000 to a donor. If there's money coming his way, he's there. He's nowhere to be seen. So rather than blame everyone else, why doesn't he do his job, get round the table and get the trains running?
Mr. Speaker, we are making sure that we do everything we can to prevent these strikes. As he knows, it is up to the railway companies to negotiate. That is their job. We've spent £16 billion looking after the railways, Mr. Speaker, throughout the pandemic. That's cost every household £600. And at the same time, we know why he takes the line he does. We know why he won't condemn the strikes. We know why even now he hasn't got the gumption to call out his MPs who are going out to support the pickets, Mr. Speaker. The reason his authority is on the line in this matter is that they take £10 million from the unions, Mr. Speaker. That's the fee that the learned gentleman opposite is receiving for the case he is failing to make.
He can't help himself. There's a huge problem facing the country, and all he's interested in doing is blaming everyone else. Can't he hear the country screaming at him, "Get on with your job"? Whilst he blames everyone and anyone, working people are paying the price. This week, his Treasury Minister said there's a society-wide responsibility for people to take a pay cut. At the same time, his Chief of Staff is trying to change the law to get bankers' bonuses increased. So come on, only one of them can be right. Is it his Treasury Minister who says every worker needs a pay cut? Or is it his Chief of Staff who says every banker needs a pay rise?
Actually, Mr. Speaker, under this government, 5 million public sector workers are getting a pay rise, Mr. Speaker. We've increased the living wage by £1,000. We've increased universal credit so that people get £1,000 more. Thanks to the fiscal firepower that we have, Mr. Speaker, we're putting £1,200 more into every one of the 8 million most vulnerable households in the country. That is what we can do because of the tough decisions that we have taken, Mr. Speaker. But meantime, what we're also trying to do is cut the costs of transport, which is a big part of people's weekly outgoings, by reforming our railways. That's what we're trying to do. But he's standing with the strikers, Mr. Speaker, and lifting the cost of transport for everybody. That's the reality.
His Chief of Staff says that removing the cap on bankers' bonuses is, in his words, reflective of our new approach. Pay rises for city bankers, pay cuts for district nurses. That's the new approach. Mr. Speaker, I didn't see that on any leaflets in Wakefield. But this hasn't come from nowhere, because according to the Financial Times, on the 7th of June last year, the Prime Minister was directly lobbied for the cap to be lifted. Rather than help working people, he's rolled over on bankers' bonuses, hasn't he?
Mr. Speaker, what we're actually doing is putting, thanks to the decisions we've taken, we are putting more money into the pockets of people up and down the country, £1,200 more for the 8 million most vulnerable households. And the reason we can do that, Mr. Speaker, is because we took the tough decisions necessary to come out of the pandemic faster than any other European country. That's why we have unemployment at or near record lows, Mr. Speaker. None of that would have been possible if we had listened to him. And we have more people now in payroll employment than we had before the pandemic began. That is what the British people know, and that is what this government is going to continue to deliver.
15 tax rises, high tax, low wages, low growth. That sums his government up. Working people paying more tax under this government, and now they're told to take a pay cut. He's having meetings about increasing bankers' bonuses, but he can't find time for a single meeting to end the strikes crippling the country. Mr. Speaker, it's Armed Forces Week. Under this Prime Minister, those serving our country are facing a real terms tax pay cut. Why is his government more focused on increasing bank...
Order. Mr McNeil, your voice isn't quiet. It's like mine, it carries. So the best thing to do, if you want it to carry, try standing on the terrace for a while.
Mr. Speaker, it's Armed Forces Week. Under this Prime Minister, those serving our country are facing a real terms pay cut. Why is his government more focused on increasing bankers' pay than the pay of those that are running the country?
Mr. Speaker, how absolutely satirical that he should talk about our support for the armed forces when we've increased our funding for our armed forces by a record sum since the end of the Cold War, and when eight of the shadow front bench actually want to get rid of our nuclear deterrent, Mr. Speaker, including the shadow foreign secretary. We're helping people up. Yes, it's true. Maybe it's true, Mr. Speaker. We are helping people up and down the country. £1,200 will be coming into their bank accounts of the 8 million most vulnerable households. The cut in national insurance will be coming into their bank accounts as a result of the steps my right honourable friend is saying. But what we're also doing is reforming our systems so we cut costs for people up and down the country. Reforming our energy markets, building a nuclear reactor every year rather than one every 10 years, Mr. Speaker, getting people off welfare into work. 500,000 people off welfare into work because we cut the time people are waiting on benefits, Mr. Speaker, and cutting the costs of transport for working people, Mr. Speaker, by delivering reforms while they're out on the picket line, literally holding hands with Arthur Scargill, Mr. Speaker. That's them. It's worse than under Jeremy Corbyn. This is a government that is taking this country forward. They would take it back to the 1970s.
For years in Harrogate and Knaresborough, we had the Labour no-growth Northern Rail franchise. We now have new rolling stock, more and better services. We have, though, seen some lost, as the industries have to suspend some services while they catch up on driver training lost during the pandemic. Strikes just takes us back to the 1970s. So will the Prime Minister's focus on the future ensure that we have apprenticeship schemes focusing on engineering and driver training to ensure that we recover the services lost and we have an industry that's focused upon efficiency and embraces technology for the future?
My right honourable friend knows exactly what he speaks, and we're doing just that. We're reforming driver training to make entry into the sector simpler, whilst continuing, of course, to make sure that we meet vital safety requirements.
We now come to Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Labour Party as we mark armed services? We can thank all our service personnel for the services that they give. Mr. Speaker, on Windrush Day, we celebrate all those who have made Scotland and the UK their home. My party backs calls for a major commemoration for the 75th anniversary next year, so we can properly mark the value contribution that those that came here have made. Mr. Speaker, this morning it was revealed that UK inflation is now at a 40-year high. Families right across these islands are seeing their income squeezed as prices rise, bills soar and Tory cuts and tax hikes hammer home. After 12 years in government, the Tories have left the UK economy in the doldrums and pushed millions of people into poverty. So, can I ask the Prime Minister, does he think his government bears any blame for the fact that the United Kingdom is doing so much worse than our European neighbours?
Actually, Mr. Speaker, I think the whole House knows and the whole country knows we've got a global inflationary problem, but this government has the fiscal firepower to deal with it, Mr. Speaker, and that is, I think, of benefit to the whole of the United Kingdom, including Scotland, as we've seen throughout the pandemic. And I think it's a matter of fact that taxes are actually highest of all in Scotland, Mr. Speaker.
Ian Blackford.
Well, actually, that is not true, Mr. Speaker. But of course, the Prime Minister can make all the excuses he likes. But the fact is, the UK economy is lagging behind on his watch. Actually, if he looks at France, inflation is less than 6% there. This morning's report from the Resolution Foundation and the London School of Economics is the latest in a string of devastating reports on the outlook for the UK economy. The report could not be clearer. The Tory government's disastrous Brexit is driving wages down, pushing inflation up, and will make us poorer over the next decade. But instead of reversing course, the Prime Minister is recklessly threatening a trade war at the worst possible time. Will he finally come to his senses and negotiate an economic agreement with the EU, or is he going to woefully push the UK into recession?
Mr. Speaker, nobody wants a trade war, nor is there any need for one. But I think I'm afraid he's underestimating what this country is currently achieving. Not just the Moderna investment, but a record venture capital investment in this country, which has now overtaken China, Mr. Speaker, as a venue for venture capital investment, and not to say nothing of what we're getting in tech. And that, of course, Mr. Speaker, the benefits of that are being felt throughout the whole of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much support the work of this government to level up all parts of the United Kingdom, including Scotland and my own constituency in the Scottish Borders. For the Scottish Borders, improved transport connectivity is the key to levelling up. So will the Prime Minister reconfirm his government's support for improvements to the cross-border A1 road, and also the feasibility study to extend the Borders Railway to Hoyt, Newcastleton and on to Carlisle?
I thank him for an excellent piece of lobbying, and I can tell him that we're looking at, certainly the Department of Transport is working with Transport Scotland on the possible extension of the Borders Railway to Carlisle, and on the A1 a decision is to be made later this year.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's emerged that there is a backlog of 23,000 applications under the Afghan Relocation and Assistance Policy, with just 2 of 3,000 applications for refuge by Afghans who worked for Britain processed since April. Yet at the same time, staff working on the Arab scheme have been slashed by a quarter since December. This is an incredible betrayal of the Afghan people who put their lives on the line to work for our country. So, I still have casework many people from the Chevening alumni, for example, who've been promised support since September. Can I send those cases to him? Will he put more resources into the scheme? And will he lift the cap on the ACRS scheme so that we can finally do our best for the people of Afghanistan?
I thank her very much, but I think I'm afraid that she's underestimating what this country is already doing for the people of Afghanistan. And I think on Armed Forces Day we should celebrate pitting that brought 15,000 out. I'm of course very happy to look at the cases that she wants to raise, and we will do our best for them and for their families, Mr. Speaker. But this House should be in no doubt of the generous welcome that we continue to give to people from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Ukraine, from Hong Kong. We have a record to be very proud of.
Andy Carter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Chapelford, in Penketh, in Great Sankey and in Appleton all tell me they want to see more police officers tackling issues like antisocial behaviour, tackling issues like domestic abuse and burglary. And thanks to the initiatives of John Dwyer, the excellent Police and Crime Commissioner in Cheshire, and sustained recruitment by the new Chief Constable, the hard work of our police officers is paying off, with almost a 50% increase in arrests for domestic abuse in Cheshire over the last 12 months compared to the last 12 months. Can my right honourable friend update the House on how many more officers have been recruited in both Cheshire and across the UK since he became the Prime Minister? And will he join me in recognising...
Mr. Prime Minister, can I just say, other members do want to get in. The longer the question, the less will get in. Your friendship will dwindle if you carry on like that. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can tell him very briefly, it's 13,576 more police officers, 200 more in Cheshire, Mr. Speaker. But what they're also doing, Mr. Speaker, is they're cutting neighbourhood crime already by 31%. Our streets are getting safer as a result.
Sorry.
Thank you. A clear majority of members of the Northern Ireland Assembly reject the government's protocol bill and the Prime Minister's rationale for it, and businesses fear its consequences. This Prime Minister has made clear on multiple occasions his commitment, so-called, to all aspects of the Good Friday Agreement.
Consensus.
That includes the European Convention on Human Rights being part of domestic law. So how can he stand over that commitment when the Justice Secretary is about to publish a bill that unpicks and disapplies the Human Rights Act within our domestic law? He can't have it both ways.
I think if the honourable gentleman will just wait for the Justice Secretary's statement, which follows shortly, I think he will find that he is in error in what he's just said.
Alexander Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. High-wage, high-skilled jobs at the heart of my campaign to level up Rother Valley and tackle the cost of living crisis. I have personally hosted 2 job fairs, and thanks to £11 million investment from the government's Levelling Up Fund, Rother Valley will benefit from a cutting-edge skills and employment village and a leading incubator space for training apprenticeships and start-ups hosted at the old Maltby Grammar School. Staff areas were neglected under Labour. In light of this, will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, pledge his support for high-wage, high-skilled Rother Valley, level up our high streets and also visit Rother Valley to see levelling up in action?
Yes, but I think probably the best member for Rother Valley that we've ever had, Mr. Speaker. I thank him very much, and we're going to continue with our agenda of levelling up across the whole country, through all the difficulties that this country has faced, and it will get young people across the country and in Rother Valley into good jobs for generations to come, and that is our ambition.
Osborne.
Speaker, tens of thousands of people were marching through London last weekend, protesting against this out-of-touch government. Rail workers are on strike, Royal Mail workers, NHS workers, teachers and even barristers are on the verge of taking industrial action. All workers are struggling to cope with the worst cost of living crisis in history. Ministers are planning to boost city bosses' pay whilst demanding wage restraint for everyone else. So can the Prime Minister tell me when is he going to stop meaningless sound bites and instead start supporting working people across our country?
If she wants to support the working people of this country, Mr. Speaker, can I suggest she gets off the picket line? And supports the and has a word with her leader, Mr. Speaker, and supports the travelling public of this country who want to see a reduction in their costs of transport, which this government is delivering.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For much of Britain, levelling up means the revitalisation of British industry and the jobs that goes with it. Many countries around the world, such as Germany and China, get a competitive advantage by burning lignite, the dirtiest form of fossil fuel. So does my right honourable friend share my concerns about the ethics of holding back British industry and exporting and magnifying our carbon emissions overseas, all in the name of net zero?
Mr. Speaker, I think we can all be proud of the way we've reduced CO2 emissions in this country, but plainly it makes no sense to be importing coal, particularly for metallurgical purposes, when we have our own domestic resources.
Louise Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister knows that we in Coventry and Warwickshire are proudly the UK's leading centre for battery vehicle innovation. He knows because he visited the UK Battery Industrialisation Centre just last year. If this government wants this vital sector to survive for the future, the Prime Minister needs to confirm his support. Will he give a concrete guarantee for the resources needed for the West Midlands Gigafactory project to go ahead, so we can deliver much-needed, skilled jobs in Coventry for 2025?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's probably the first sensible question from the opposition benches, and I can tell her that we do actively support gigafactories because I believe they can be of huge advantage for the UK economy. That's why I'm proud to see one now in Blythe. We're working with the authorities in the West Midlands, in Coventry, to make sure that we also get a successful result there.
Sir Bill Wiggin.
Hereford Sixth Form College has over 600 students who rely on the trains to get them to their exams this week. What can my right honourable friend do to ensure that these young people doing their GCSEs and A-levels are not punished by the train strikers?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know how much my right honourable friend cares for students in his constituency, and I can tell him that no exams have been cancelled as a result of the strikes so far. We expect schools and colleges to have contingency arrangements in place to manage disruption. If students arrive late, then schools should allow them to take the paper, and exam boards will determine if that paper can be marked based on how late the student is. And I'm told that, Mr. Speaker, if the student misses the exam completely, the school can apply for their grades to be calculated from the other assessments they have completed in that subject. And I hope that is helpful to my right honourable friend.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister will be aware of the problems that arose in Paris at the European Cup final. Will he agree with me that both the French and UEFA authorities' attempts to blame Liverpool fans for the failure to keep order at the stadium has been comprehensively disproven? And will he ensure that the French failure to police the event is roundly condemned?
I thank him very much, Mr. Speaker, and I think the whole House will have seen how those initial accounts of what took place were completely debunked and proved to be incorrect in respect of the Liverpool fans, and I think it was right that the French authorities and I think UEFA issued a full apology for what took place.
Sir Desmond Swade.
Taking back control is to apply to the ECHR too, isn't it?
Mr. Speaker, I think he should wait for my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, who will be saying a little bit about that in just a moment. But I can tell him that when it comes to the Rwanda policy that we are pursuing, that policy, Mr. Speaker, has not been ruled unlawful by any UK court, nor so far by any international court, Mr. Speaker. And we will continue with that policy.
Lyra Wilson.
much, Mr. Speaker. The father-in-law of my constituent, Ibrahim, is a former Supreme Court judge in Afghanistan. He successfully prosecuted and put behind bars hundreds of terrorists associated with the Taliban, Al-Qaeda and ISIS. 7 months on since he put in his Arab application, there is no progress. He's living in hiding. His only option is a perilous journey to Pakistan, where if his visa is refused, he will be deported back into the hands of the Taliban. So, will the Prime Minister meet with me and the former judge's family to see how we can save the life of a man who I have no doubt has helped save hundreds of British lives?
Well, can I thank her very much for raising that particular case, and it does sound extremely meritorious, and I'll make sure that she gets a meeting with the Department of Defence that runs ARAP, Mr. Speaker, and that we do our best to expedite that application as fast as we can.
To Ben Spass.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to represent over 1,000 Park Home residents. When will the government address the injustice of pitch fees determined by RPI, and how is the government going to ensure they can all benefit from the energy grant?
I thank the honourable gentleman, my honourable friend. We are going to introduce legislation as soon as parliamentary time allows to change the inflationary index used in calculating the annual pitch fee to CPI, Mr. Speaker, and I'm told that the Department for Levelling Up and Housing has undertaken research on the impacts on residents and site owners of a change to the 10% commission that is currently paid on the sale of a park home.
Caroline Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the Prime Minister is as thrilled as I am that you, Mr. Speaker, signed the Wellbeing of Women Menopause Pledge last week to show support for women in this place. So will the Prime Minister follow Mr. Speaker's example and ensure with a better access to treatment for women in England by introducing the single annual payment for HRT now, not make them wait till April 23, a full 18 months after it was first promised?
I thank her very much for raising what is a very important issue, and one that is understood keenly on all sides of this House. And I know that my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, is accelerating the work of the HRT task force to give people up and down the country the reassurance and the treatment that they need.
Final question, Dean Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was incredibly grateful that the Prime Minister launched my initiative to train 1,000 mental health first aiders in awareness in Watford over a year and a half ago, and it's being successfully delivered by Watford and West Herts Chamber of Commerce and many amazing volunteers. So I know he understands the importance of mental well-being and mental health. Sadly, bullying can have a long-lasting effect on mental health and well-being. So today, the Diana Award are raising awareness about bullying in schools and online, and with the Don't Face It Alone campaign. So will the Prime Minister please join me in encouraging any young person experiencing bullying to speak up and speak out?
Can I thank him very much and congratulate him on his own campaign on this issue. I think everybody understands that bullying is an absolutely appalling experience and something that we should not tolerate in our society. And I'm delighted to see so many colleagues, so many honourable members wearing their blue ribbons today, Mr. Speaker. We should all speak out against bullying, but we should also make sure that we give everybody the courage to speak out against bullying as well.
That ends PMQs. Those who wish to leave, please do so. On the proof back. No, it's important. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Nice and tight now, Mr. Speaker.
It was good. Thank you. Thanks everyone. That worked well. That was good.